Spider-Man Hostile Takeover. Chapter 11. It was truth universally acknowledged that a man with pizza would want something to drink. She knocked on his front door holding a six-pack of swilled Coca-Cola. He came to the door wearing a tank top and sweatpants. He wasn't a huge guy, but he was wiry and covered with a defined layer of muscle. He had a low forehead and thick eyebrows that came dangerously close to touching. A wide nose that had clearly been broken more than a few times, and thin, bloodless lips. It was the eyes that struck her most, though. They were pale blue, and small, and strangely cloudy. As if he was thinking about something else, even while trying to process the meaning of the beverage-laden stranger at his door. Maya gave him her best smile. She wasn't exactly dressed to impress, and she hated, absolutely hated, using her looks to sway men. On the other hand, there was nothing wrong with being friendly. "I thought you could use a drink to go with that pizza." He squinted his eyes and looked as if his mind was 1,000 miles away. "You a neighbor or something?" He stuck his head out of the door and looked around. "I don't like neighbors. I don't like nosy neighbors especially." "I'm not the neighbor," Maya said. Still, she started it, so she might as well go for broke. "I'm just a person who thought you might have worked up a big thirst swinging around the city." There was a blur of movement. The bags clambered to the floor, and she was inside Bigham's apartment. Her arm hurt. She was backed against the wall. He had grabbed her, lashed out like a viper, and pulled her inside. One of the soda cans had cracked open and its hissing contents pooled on the floor. Bigham slammed the door shut and spun to face her. His eyes were no longer cloudy, no longer distant. "Who sent you?" he demanded. Moving closer, Maya was in her element. She'd seen him fight on video camera feed. It hadn't been much, but it had been enough. He swung at her, hurling a fist like a barroom brawler, but connected only with air. As he turned, she was in his blind spot, behind him, dealing a sharp blow to his kidneys. He let out a hissing breath and staggered forward. Maya took a step back and held up her hands. "I just brought drinks," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you." Then she looked around. There was something weird about this apartment. There was no real furniture, just some plastic folding chairs and a table. The pizza box was propped on one of the chairs. No television, no books or magazines, nothing to keep him busy except clear plastic stacking boxes, and they held very peculiar things. A container of paper clips, another of rubber bands, a third of unused hotel soap bars, and those were the less disturbing ones. There were containers of dirt, of frayed shoelaces, of crumpled balls of tissues. There were jars too. Some of them contained liquid of various shades of yellow. Maya didn't want to think about those. Another contained what had to be hundreds of dead cockroaches. Under no circumstances did she want to be in an enclosed space with a cockroach collector. Without saying a word, he came at her again, fast and deadly. Like her father's killer, he had incredible skills, but he fought much more conventionally. He lashed out with a fist. She made as if to return the punch, but stepped back instead. She wasn't there to prove herself. She wasn't there to beat him. She wanted information. If she damaged him, it might make Mr. Fisk very, very angry with her. "Stop! We're on the same side," she said. "I work for Mr. Fisk, just like you." Bigham took another swing at her, but caught only air. He then stopped and laughed. "How do you do that?" he asked with his body language a little more relaxed. "I'm fast," she said. "We're both fast, right?" She wasn't nearly as fast as he was, but she could fight a whole lot smarter than this guy. If she had access to his technology, to his training, whatever that had been, She can only imagine the things she could accomplish. Avenging her father was the top of the list. Making Spider-Man pay was the first thing she would do. But after that, she could do whatever Mr. Fisk needed her to be. He stood and lowered his hands, keeping them clenched into fists. She observed. "Who are you again?" Bigum asked. The fight over, he turned to grab a slice from the box of pizza. He took a long time choosing his piece. Then he's snapping around, grinning at her. "Wawa?" "No thanks." She couldn't imagine eating food that had spent any time in this apartment. He turned to study the fallen beverages. This seemed to occupy him for some reason. Maybe he wasn't as bright as she thought. After a moment, he grabbed a can of soda. "Some drink?" he said, grinning again. "I'm good," she said. "Just want to talk." "You can't hear anything," he smiled broadly. "You're a deafie. You've been watching my lips." Then it struck her. He'd asked her the same questions about the pizza and the drinks when he'd had his back to her and she hadn't known. Maya didn't make a point of hiding the fact that she was deaf. If they wanted to underestimate her, they would do so at their own peril. Still, she felt as if she'd given up a weakness he could exploit. "How come you don't have that deaf person voice?" he asked earnestly, as if it was a reasonable question. "Because I've worked hard to sound like someone who could hear," she said, crossing her arms. "Now, would you mind if I ask you a few questions?" "Are you here because Mr. Fisk sent you?" he said, tearing a piece out of the pizzas as if he was imagining biting someone's head off. "You can tell Mr. Fisk that sending his little deaf girl over here wasn't part of the deal." Maya frowned. This would be a lot easier if they could relax, and she wished Bigum would invite her to sit. Though now that she thought about it, she wasn't sure she'd want to sit in any of those chairs. "I think we got off to a bad start," she suggested. "I don't know. It was fun when I grabbed you," Bigum said. "Yanked you inside. That was a good start," he scowled. "It wasn't so good after that." "I just need some information," Maya said. "For Mr. Fisk." Bigum snorted. "Too bad, because I'm not a Fisk bootlicker. I don't work for him, deaf girl. I'm a contractor." "Contractor," he repeated, dragging the words out. "You understand? That means he asked me to do a job. If I want to do it and the price is right, it'll get done. If I don't like it, I don't do it. That's how it works. But there's nothing I can't do. Did you know that about me? Did you know I'm special?" "No," Maya said sweetly. "I mean, I heard you had an impressive skill set." She left it at that, to see what he'd say. "You don't know anything," he replied. "Thief, assassin, safecracker, infiltrator, human dynamo, space explorer, black ops and wet work. You want it? I've done it. I've been trained." She thought he puffed out his chest a little. The world was a strange place, but Maya was willing to gamble it all that this guy had never been in space. And what exactly was a human dynamo? Regardless, Mr. Fisk was trusting Bigum to do a job, so she could assume the thieving and safecracking were real. "So, what was your mission tonight?" she asked. "For Mr. Fisk." "If you don't know, I ain't gonna tell," he replied belligerently. The grin was long gone. "You're real pretty, but I'm not dumb enough to let anything slip. How do I even know you work for Fisk?" She took a business card out of her pocket and handed it to him. He stared at it for a minute, then screwed his face up in a smirk. "Anyone can print these up," he said. "But you know what? I believe you. You want to know why I believe you?" "Because you're a human dynamo?" She shook her head. "It's how you talk about him," he continued. "See, people give away things how they say stuff. And you sound like you'd be happy to spend all day, every day licking his gigantic shoes. That's how I know you're the real deal. So what I think is this, Miss Special Assistant. He waved their business card around. I think you're maybe not as special an assistant you'd like to be. I think maybe the Kingpin hasn't told you nearly as much as you'd like to know about my business. Maybe you asked him and he clammed up, Bingham added. Maybe you didn't have the guts to ask him. You clearly have guts, but when it comes to him, I ain't so sure. Still, you've got the guts to come here and spy on me, and then ask me about it. Go toe-to-toe with the guy who could wipe the floor with you. That's what I think. Maya narrowed her eyes. Bingham wasn't terribly smart. Of that, she was certain. At the same time, he was a kind of animal cunning that made him dangerous. It wouldn't do to underestimate him again. Yet she could use him to her advantage. A person like this, who likely had struggled in school, who had spent his whole life knowing he wasn't smart enough, would have weaknesses she could exploit. Very good, she said. Best to soft pedal it. You're not wrong, but just because Mr. Fisk hasn't chose me to tell everything, you don't have to make the same choice. We could come to an understanding. Even she wasn't sure what that might mean, but his reaction could speak volumes. He snorted. Nice try, he said, but I'm not saying anything that might affect me getting paid. I need money. For my things. Okay then. Okay. Then at least tell me this, she said. Where did you get those moves? How did you learn to imitate Spider-Man? And do it so well? Imitate? Bingham choked out the word. I'm not imitating anyone. I am Spider-Man. Maya stared at him, not sure what to say. Look at this. He lifted his shirt. At first glance, he appeared to have a bandage strapped across his stomach. Then she realized it was a pouch. The soft, nervous travelers wore when in strange cities, so they wouldn't have to leave their passports in hotel rooms or risk having them stolen out of pocket or backpacks. Bingham reached into the pouch and pulled out an old black and white photo. Unfolding it, it was brittle and held together by tape, where folds had split long ago. He handed it to her. The photo showed Spider-Man swinging through Midtown. He was facing toward the camera, as if he knew it was there. There was something about the angle and the composition of the image that made it appear as if he was looking right at the viewer. No, it was something more than that. It felt as if he was looking into her. Maya refolded it quickly. She couldn't even stomach the illusion that Spider-Man might read her thoughts. He'd known them in the end, though. She would be the last person he saw when she avenged her father. There was some small printing on the back of the photograph. It was a Daily Bugle logo and a date from 6 years earlier. She handed the print back to Bingham, letting go the moment his fingers made contact. Maya didn't want him touching her. It was creepy. Do you see it? He asked. Honestly, she said. No, I didn't. He snorted and put the photo back in his secret pouch. They never do. Not until it's too late. Soon, it'll be too late for you, deaf girl. Abruptly, he waved toward the hallway. Now get out of here while you still can. With that, he turned his back on her, and Maya had the distinct impression he was still talking to her, deliberately saying things he knew she couldn't hear. Opening the door, she walked out of his apartment, more confused than ever. What was Mr. Fisk thinking? Putting his trust in someone so unpredictable. What could be so important? He was a man who never took chances, who mapped out every move like a chess master. Why on earth would he introduce such irrationality into his oh-so-rational world? Yet experience told her not to doubt. There had been times in the past where she'd been unable to see her mentor's grand strategy. Though she was ashamed to admit it, there had even been a time where she doubted his innocence. Yet he'd always proved himself prescient and precise and just. Here again, she might doubt, but eventually she'd see the wisdom of his actions. She knew it to be true. But she also knew she could not let it go.